AskReddit by DataV. Have you ever gotten up and quit your job in the middle of a work shift? If so, why? Day 2. Owner tells me that he pays taxes for us, so he pays cash and it is after taxes. So 7.5 and not the 10 per hour we agreed to. I walked out and called the IRS hotline to report fraud. I had a lady who owned a Subway do this to me for like 2 weeks. She said she was getting my payroll straightened out, and when I got my check she took out taxes and she actually never paid them either, so when I did my taxes there was no record of me working for her. She literally stole my money. I was looking for work and took anything I could find. Unfortunately the job I found was telemarketing. I hate myself too. Anyway, the work sucked and I hated it. I always took no for an answer and that got me in lots of trouble. They kept putting me in a room with this old VHS tape on pressure tactics and never taking no for an answer. The tape went for an hour, so I just had a nap instead. Thankfully I was also looking for work on the side and got a job at the local supermarket, so I knew I had a backup plan. The next time they put me in that room with that tape, I had a nap again, and then when I came out they said if you have to go in there again your position will be terminated. I just said I'll save you the trouble. I quit. That really pissed them off because they were already understaffed. Same thing happened to me. Everyone yelling at me or hanging up. Boss pressuring me to make more calls. Took my lunch break and never went back. Dishwasher. Had worked there 2 weeks. The AC for kitchen and office both broke the day before I started. Office AC was fixed the following day. Kitchen AC wasn't priority. It was a heat wave in August, hitting 115 degrees outside. The whole kitchen staff walked out. If the kitchen staff didn't walk out, someone would probably have died. I was 17 and just finished mopping the floor at closing time and was walking out the door. The owner's son walked across the floor in boots covered in motor oil and told me to mop this shit up. I dropped the mop on the floor and told him to do it himself. I was being paid minimum wage and wasn't going to deal with that shit. Similar situation. I started at a McDonald's because I was desperate. First day, it's already 2 hours past the time I was supposed to go home, but they kept telling me I had to stay and wait. For what exactly, Dart? Finally they said sweep the kitchen and go home. I swept into a big pile, was about to put everything into the dustpan when the shift lead came by and said looks good, then she kicked the pile out and said now do it again. I made myself an ice cream cone and left. Yeah, me and the entire waiting staff walked out. The new owner of the restaurant I work for wanted to charge the staff for breakages. Restaurant owners need to understand that breakages happen and are part of overhead. Glad the whole crew walked. Wonder if the owner was able to keep up. I worked at a car wash during the winter in the wet tunnel. Manager got in my face for wearing a coat that didn't have the company logo on it, but they didn't make uniform coats. Told him to eat my entire ass and choke on it, and then left. It gets below zero here regularly. I'm not risking my life or even my comfort for $12 an hour. Missed opportunity to say wipe down this and fuck you, and your eyebrows. Temp agency sent me for assignment at a small factory making furniture. 7 AM start time. At 7:03 or 04, while still waiting for some sort of foreman supervisor to come over and say hello. Here's what we do here. Couple of dudes start shouting at each other and it breaks out into full-blown fisticuffs. Yeah, I'd seen enough. Funny how I have a completely crystal clear memory of looking at the clock in my car as I drove away. 7:12 AM. Hope you got paid for that quarter hour. Dell Computer Sales 1998. They fired 90% of all the commission-making salespeople and replaced them with hourly workers from a temp agency. They then asked me to train them. I was like, maybe you should have trained them before firing everyone. Why would I train them so you can fire me in 2 weeks? I then grabbed my shit and noped out of there. Similar thing just happened to them again. They laid off 6.5k workers, many of which were on my team when I worked for them. 2019 to 2020. I saw some writing on the wall and bounced, maybe early but justified. They then brought in a shit ton of fresh college grads because they understand they can work these people to the bone. This layoff affected people who were there for 20 plus years and it's all they'd known. Had a part-time job for about 40 minutes in college. Started as a data entry job, paid $7.25. The owner found out I was going to school for an ed-related field and starting throwing tasks like updating his website and basic tech support. I left almost immediately. Excuse me, would you like to upgrade your subscription from underpaid data entry to it? Closest I personally came was giving 1 day's notice when I was a 3rd grade teacher. Basically the entire job was me fighting administration for more than literally zero time to actually do the job I was there to do. When I asked for time to plan lessons, help students who were falling behind, or work on helping special needs students in my class, I was denied every time. No exaggeration, I was in the beginning phases of a mental breakdown. I went into front office one morning to ask about what the best way to quit was in a way that didn't negatively impact my students, but before I could ask they gave me the bad news, that the last 7 hire teachers, that is me and 6 others, were being moved to other schools the following Monday due to enrollment changes, and I immediately said great, I quit, and left the next day. It was really sad leaving my class, but from the bottom of my heart, fuck that job. Administration at schools has basically ruined being a teacher. My husband loves teaching. The kids are usually great. But every day it seems like some admin screws up and the teachers are left to fix the problems. No resources, no funding, shit pay, shit retirement compared to older generations. I swear, the country just wants cannon fodder idiots. $10 an hour. My boss would solve problems exclusively by shouting. One day I was super busy, and I skipped putting out a table. I was wrong, but it was one of 60 I put out. The chef asked nicely if I could. I said yeah. I'll grab it. Before I could, I hear just screaming. It's nothing helpful. Just screeching the same words I was told 30 seconds earlier. At that point I was sick of it. I told her this is why we can't keep staff. I walked out. I got woken up the next morning to the morning manager asking for me to help. I said I would come in, but today is my only day, and if I see the other manager at all I'm walking out. I finished the morning prep, and left. I was told later that she was fired after 2 more people quit on her the next day. I got a job at a new grooming salon in a Petco. It was a commission-based job, and they still had a sign out front saying grooming salon coming soon. So after a week of making no money, I came into work and the manager said, "You can't wear jeans here." "Okay," I replied, then turned around and walked out never to be seen again. He called a week later asking me to come back. I laughed and hung up. What is a dog groomer supposed to wear? A suit and tie? Heels? Good on you for walking out. Yep. I started a job on a Monday. Friday came and I get a paycheck at lunchtime. Didn't expect that as most places hold back a week. They paid on Friday assuming you are finishing out your day and giving you credit for those hours. Anyways, I get my check and I notice I'm being paid $2 less an hour than we agreed on. I bring it up and the foreman tells me, "Yeah, sorry about that, I couldn't get the big guy, the owner, to agree to those rates." I'm like, "Oh, and you didn't think that might be something I would like to know?" His answer, "Well, there isn't much we can do about that now. I'll try and work on him in a month or 2, and he turned and walked away. I got up, wheeled my toolbox to the garage door and brought my truck around and loaded it up. He comes out just as I'm finished and his jaw drops to the floor and tries to get me to stay. "No way, dude, you screwed me, I'm out. See ya." Called me 5 times in the next 2 weeks, each time offering more money, but I just kept saying no. He eventually gave up and I found a job paying me higher than his last offer anyways, so it worked out. Yeah, that there is what we call super illegal. I was 23 working a construction temp job as a carpenter doing demo at an office they were renovating. The foreman of the company that hired me asked me to do two things: clear out a room and assist the electricians that were working the site. About an hour into that task he came in the building while I was helping the electricians unload materials and yelled at me for pausing demo to lend a hand, even though that's pretty much what he told me to do. I dropped everything, packed up all my stuff, and told the guy to shove it. I'd been treated better by superiors when I was working 2 minimum wage jobs and living out of my car than I had for the whole 2 days I knew this foreman. Deleted. As soon as management calls me a name like that, I'm out. If you can't control your anger to not throw names at your staff, you don't belong in management. Got called a little sh because I had poured the wrong drink and was very firm if I heard a name like that again they can find someone else and continue being short-staffed. Called me another name a few days later and let her be alone for the rest of that busy shift. Management have no right treating employees rudely. As a kid I worked at Sears for a summer, as a cashier. Sears is a shitty company that's been actively dying for years. So they were really pushing these shitty credit cards with extremely predatory interest rates. We were required to try to sell them to every customer. I'm not a douche, so when I was told no, I dropped the issue and carried on the transaction as normal. One day a manager was standing behind me watching me ring out a big line of people. When I didn't try to bully anyone into getting a credit card, she told me I was basically a dog that rolls over for anyone. Told her to fuck herself with a pine cone and walked out. My first day they asked if I could stay late and do a 10-hour day. I said sure. Next day was the same. Then they flat out told me that everyone was doing 12-hour days 7 days a week. Before I got the job they mentioned they do some overtime but it's optional. Well, once I got hired I realized it wasn't optional unless you want to get fired. So I worked for about 2 months straight. Saturday they usually didn't care if you came in an hour later. One day I just need that extra sleep and went in 30 minutes later. Boss lost it on me and talked shit about me all day to my co-workers. He even started to send some of the guys home an hour early that came in at the other time and told them he was going to keep me later. That's when it hit me. I owe them nothing and fuck them. I started to pack up my tools and my boss asked what I was doing. Told him I'm done with his games and to fuck off. As I loaded my... Oh yeah. I worked at a call center answering service on the 7 AM to 3 PM shift and was in school part-time taking evening classes. They changed my schedule to be the evening shift 3 to 11 PM with only 2 days notice and told me if I wanted to keep working there I'd have to find a way to make it work with my school schedule. So I went to my desk, packed up my things, put my phone on hold and went home. If there's anyone here going to school who wants an A job that pays pretty good with good schedules, work at TQL if you can. I work night shift which is midnight to 8. But there's also first and second shift and lots of random hours some people work that you could work out with your boss. A lot of people I work with are also going to school right now. All they require is a high school diploma or GED. It's a call center and we talk to truck drivers out on the road. Help them get their loads delivered. Pay for the fees to get the truck unloaded, stuff like that. It's pretty boring and some of the truckers can be rude as shit, but TQL pays pretty good for a call center job. I make $19.50 an hour right now. First and second shift start off at $16 an hour I think, but you get raises pretty quick as they train you up on the different customer accounts and whatnot. Deleted. 1 table in 1 week? How bad was that restaurant? My boss had the very good idea of firing me when I arrived in the morning, but she still wanted me to do my workday. I escaped through an emergency exit. Back in HS I was homesick, just getting over a pretty bad stomach bug I'd had for a couple days. Grocery store manager calls me and begs me to come in because they were slammed. I was still pretty weak, but figured I felt okay enough to go help for a couple hours and help run a register. Arrived to the store which isn't busy at all. Apparently I just missed the rush, but since I was there, I could clock in and clean the bathrooms and take all the department garbages out to the dumpster. do the work the manager didn't want to do. Or I could just quit and leave. So 17-year-old me declined, quit and went back home. Went shopping with my mom there the next day. BOGO deals were too good. I was at the height of my alcoholism, working in a pizza shop. I was making pizzas and trying to hold it together while in active withdrawal. Got my paycheck via direct deposit and decided I would move on to bigger and better things that day. Bigger and better things being a big bottle of gas station vodka and some $1 lemonade for a mixer. Don't recommend working in a hot environment as an alcoholic in active withdrawal. Honesty on Reddit is refreshing. Hope you either kicked the habit or got financially solvent enough where it isn't an issue. McDonald's. Our manager Mark was a dick. He chucked the bag of McFlurry toppings at me during another one of his tantrums and told me to fill it. I threw it back at his head, then threw my hat at him, then my MCDS polo, then walked out half naked. Would have thrown my pants and shoes too, but I paid for them. Fuck you, Mark. Bro probably didn't expect the clap back. Was working as a telemarketer 20+ years ago. Guy a few cubicles away from me got in trouble for going off script, flipped out, threw his large computer monitor on the ground and said he was coming back tomorrow to kill all of us. I took my time eating my sandwich at lunch that day, came back, and decided that I had spread enough misery for one summer. Told my manager and left. That's nuts. Did anyone else take his threat seriously? I walked out during a shift as a farm tech at Walgreens. I went to lunch and never went back. Only so much bullying I could put up with from coworkers. And only so much yelling and screaming I can deal with from customers. It felt like every other customer was yelling expletives at me because their copay was higher than last time, or the brand looks different because we used a different manufacturer, or we couldn't refill your fentanyl script a week early. You wouldn't believe the number of people who've told me that I'm going to cause the death of them because I won't violate the law. Please be nice when you go to pick up your meds. The job sucks. My third job working for Xerox. My shift was from 5-2 and all day it was just taking call after call from angry veras and customers begging for another month of free service with varying excuses. My grandma died and I need to make calls, or the bus I was in broke down and I need a month of free service or I'll be stranded. All day, every day, being forced to tell these people no regardless of how legitimate their excuses were, then getting completely cussed out and yelled at. We had regulars, too. One was an old guy that would call every Wednesday and ask me what I was wearing while obviously jerking off. One day, I'd woken up at 4 once again tired as hell, got ready, then drove through a blizzard to be at work only to be greeted by indifference from management and a bunch of people missing due to call-outs. I stood up from my computer before I even clocked on, told my supervisor I quit. He said I needed a letter of resignation, so I walked back to my desk and wrote I quit on a page of my spiral notebook. Handed it to him and walked out. It was the best feeling ever. I was a convenience. That's literally the worst opener I've ever seen. Hey, just so you know, I'm a horrible boss. Juice. Over 2 decades ago, I walked out on Target. They kept scheduling me outside of my availability, no matter how often I brought it to their attention. The last time they did so, I reminded them that my availability had zero wiggle room. They told me to figure it out. So I did. Other than that aspect of things being mismanaged, I liked working there well enough. I had nice peers and all. Target did this to me 5 years ago. It was the unloading crew and we worked like 4 AM to 7 AM. A couple of weeks into the job I had a full-time job elsewhere that started at 9 AM. Week 4 they start scheduling me to 10 AM, wouldn't be past 7 when I got hired. Told them I couldn't work beyond 7 because I had another job. The supervisor's response was that Target is so much better and I should quit that job instead. I finished that shift and never returned. My supervisor was a huge conspiracy theorist and talked non-stop about flat earth. Half of that crew walked out within that week anyways, a lot of college kids. I was a cable guy in HS over the summer. On a Friday, I crashed my motorcycle while leaving a job site. On Monday, it was all hands on deck because we were behind on a high school renovation. Even the receptionist was helping. I showed up to work with a soft cast that went from my ankle to my hip with blood soaking through the kneecap area. I was slowly going down a ladder, trying not to fall since I couldn't bend my knee and I was in pain. The receptionist said, "Could you move any slower?" I said, "F this, I don't need this job, I'm going to college in a couple months, and I shouldn't even be out of bed." I left and never came back. I had knee surgery shortly after. I worked a door. We barred all the local drug dealers. They came back multiple times over the next few weeks trying to attack us. Came to work one day and they was all allowed back in the pub. The landlord missed the money they put behind the bar. I left, wasn't worth the risk. I just walked off the door and left them to it. Smart move. Got hired at a mall bakery in the late 80s as an assistant manager. The training was horrible and I specifically asked what I was supposed to do in case of emergency. Call 911 was the answer. One of the teenagers cut his hand badly while opening a large can. We made everything from scratch, and blood was spurting everywhere. It looked like a murder scene. The baked goods were bloody, we were bloody, and I had to deal with it, so I closed down the shop to focus and to not sell bloody product. Another employee was a retired nurse, so she triaged him and took him to the ER while the rest of us tried to clean up. I got written up for closing the store, so I walked out. If you don't tell me what to do in real emergencies, don't blame me for trying to figure it out on my own. I worked in a service department and was on the phone with a customer when my manager came into my workspace and started yelling at me for some reason. I'll never know why. I held up my finger and showed him I was on the phone, but he kept yelling at me. I told the customer that I would need to call him back, hung up the phone, then proceeded to pull a couple pictures off my desk, get my purse, and to the back to clock out. I literally ignored him and just left. It felt amazing. The owner called me later and asked me to return, but I declined. I walked into work, unlocked my toolbox, took deep breath, locked my toolbox and drove home. What kind of work was it? 19 years old, working retail. It was inventory time. I worked 19 hours the day before and was asked to come in before store opening and was asked to stay all day. So, I came in at 6 AM, 12 hours later, not one fucking break. I asked to take lunch. I was asked if I could wait. I then begged to go to lunch. I was told that I could, but to only take as little time as needed. I clocked out, went to Burger King, had lunch, debated on my future. Realized that the manager knew where I went, so I walked across the street to the mall, called home and told them where I was, that I needed a pickup and that I would explain later. I only went back to collect my last paycheck. Worked at this small fine dining restaurant as one of 2 bartenders with 4 servers. Owner was an old bitch. The chef was incredible and a good guy, which is why I stayed for so long. Some of the best food I've ever had in my life, but he was an alcoholic. He'd drink at least a bottle of Jameson a shift. And he had a shady sous chef. He definitely knew how much he was drinking and was stealing extra bottles, no doubt about it. Fast forward, the owner started catching on to missing bottles and expenses. She blamed the bartender and I for stealing them and wanted us to pay for them. The entire team walked out the door and quit 30 minutes before open. Also, it was my birthday. Was working holiday season at a local post office as a rural carrier, which meant I ran the Saturday route for a full-time employee. Paid good and helped me save to purchase my first home, but it was a 6-hour route that mostly took me 10 hours to complete. Like I said, holiday season, so plenty of packages and regular mail, plus rural meant back roads, in snow, driving while sitting in my passenger seat, leg kicked over the transmission hump. Lots of stress and long Saturdays. Finally was bit by a chihuahua while delivering and said F it. brought back all undelivered mail and set it on the postmaster's desk. Thanked them for the opportunity and called it a career. It took a lot of preparation as far as training, background checks, etc., but I knew it wasn't for me. I give those folks doing those jobs at the postal service credit. Not for me though. Fucking ankle biters. Just as bad as mosquitoes. Yep. I was working as a cook in a small restaurant. Since it was slow, the owner left to go play tennis while he made me do everything: serving, washing dishes, and cooking. So I was literally the only employee there. And what do you know, that day it got busy and we got a bunch of customers and I ran the entire operation solo, serving, cooking, washing dishes. After the rush died down, I quit and walked out. After Wendy's, I was training to be a GM, got sent to a store that was so short it was just the three of us in total. 4 schrock buses full of Chinese tourists rolled in and drive-through wrapped half-mile down the road from a football game. Rush. Literally 100 plus people in the lobby, none of which spoke English, and a rap drive-through of pissed off hungry football fans. I called the DM and he just shrugged and said, "Handle it, work faster." I just walked right out, past the angry Chinese bus driver screaming at me and the dude in drive-through screaming at me that this was no time for a break, hopped in my car, and left. Turned my phone off, went home and binged anime till I passed out. The voicemails the next day were hilarious. I was a bar back at a 5-diamond wedding conference venue. I had to work a 13-hour shift, and my brother just passed away from cancer in another state the day before. The only thing I got to do was hear him say "I love you" very weak over the phone. So obviously going into my shift, I was super upset. I really couldn't keep it together and my co-workers told me to go home and they'll cover my wedding I was doing, only 80 people, and we were overstaffed. I told my manager my situation and that they'd cover me, and I made sure the bar was stocked, and she told me that is a poor excuse to leave work, especially halfway through the night. I dropped my walkie-talkie and badge on the floor without saying anything and left. I'm sorry about your brother. That manager was a heartless vile hag. Long story short, since I've posted it before elsewhere, for 3 years I watched the owner get in verbal shouting matches with his employees, then have a closed door apology meeting, and repeat sometimes with the same employees. It was my turn. We did the yelling back and forth. I knew how it would play out. Grabbed my jacket from the office, told the one co-worker I liked who saw our argument "good luck man," and left at 10 AM on the 13th of March 20. Timing could literally not be worse, but the job was causing me to gain weight and lose hair. I'm looking for the opposite. A job that makes me lose weight and gain hair. I worked in retail when I was young. At one job, another employee started violently berating me and calling me names after I asked a simple question. When I started crying over it and walked to the back room to calm down, he followed me and made fun of me. I think he was mentally challenged, but I wasn't going to put up with that kind of harassment at work. I walked out of that store and never went back. I worked for Dish TV as a installer. Nothing was said to me during the hiring training process. After about 4 months of work, my manager complained I wasn't upselling enough new installs, like a basic sub-package to premium channels, for example. I told him I had no desire to sell people something they didn't want. He pressed, I walked. To add to it, I was a remote tech, worked out of my house instead of a shop. Dish shipped me all my equipment. I told him he could pick up his crap the next day or it would be on the curb. 2 trucks showed up the next day. What a crappy company. I was working in the meat department at a grocery store and had a manager that was a dick. He was always acting like he was some big top dog alpha douche. I came in one morning and he was in a pissy mood about something and was acting more dickish than usual, and after a couple hours of it I had enough. He came walking up to me bitching about how I was taking too long on something. I can't remember now what it was, and I looked at him and told him to go fuck himself. I took off my apron, set it on the table, and left. He was running his mouth the whole time I was walking away. It was all I could do to not pick up one of the knives and chuck it at him. Yep. Twice. One time I was cocktail serving in the West Village. The owner's ex-girlfriend liked to come in and run the servers ragged, treat them like trash, and get everything for free, then not even tip. I hadn't had to deal with her before, but had heard stories from the other servers. She came in and tried it with me. I gave her one warning. She got mad OFC. I told the manager to deal with her or I'm leaving. He blew me off, so I went downstairs for my coat and bag, then walked right out the front door. Server equals servant. The other time I was working a soul-sucking warehouse job because the economy sucked and I was kinda homeless with no other options. I just couldn't do it anymore, so I left for my lunch break and didn't go back. Was expecting to leave for boot camp in 3 months. Got a call from the recruiter in the middle of my shift. A spot opened up for 4 days from now. I left and have never been back to that Walmart. A customer got angry that I politely told them to put their feet down in the movie theater and that their daughter can't climb on the seats. I used to work in a theater, called me a fuckload of names and then reported me. I got reprimanded. I quit because I did exactly what I was told to do. I basically got in trouble for doing the job they instructed me to do. I had worked for a tuxedo rental company for 6 years. That's a long time in the industry. Most people quit after their first wedding season. I'd been trying to get an assistant manager position for the last 2 years. They kept hiring people from outside the industry. They would always quit within a year. I was at work when I got told I was passed over again for the 5th fucking time and they hired someone from outside the industry. I quit right then and there. My manager was shocked. Woman, I've worked with you specifically for 3 years. I've run locations alone during prom because we had no staff. I'm amazing at what I do and love the job, and you knew how hard I'd been trying to get that position. Fuck you and fuck this company. Guess who went out of business a few years after I left? I suppose it was a good thing I left, but I went into a completely different industry. The whole experience left a sour taste in my mouth and I want nothing to do with weddings ever again. Had a creepy ass manager that would give pay raises to women only. When I found out I had been working there longer and getting paid less because I didn't have boobs, I brought it up to him. Dude didn't like getting called out, so I told him I wasn't coming back. Finished my shift and didn't come back for my next shift. Dude calls me trying to get me back and I was like, nope. If you call me again it better be to tell me my last check is ready for pickup. Yes. Old guy here. During the war in Vietnam I worked on an AV facility where bombs were made, 250, 500, and 1,000 pounders. My job was to secure the bombs inside boxcars and semi-trailers for shipment to the West Coast. I worked midnights, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I made lots of money. Lots. I had become entirely skeptical of the war. One night I was crawling across a pallet of warm bombs inside a boxcar when I had this sudden vision of an Asian guy doing something similar on the other side of the Pacific. What the hell am I doing? Exclamation point. I climbed down, left the boxcar, and told my boss that I quit. Right now. He tried to convince me to stay as I was a good worker. I refused. He was a nice man. He drove me back to the main shop. I punched out, went to my car, and left. I'm sure you don't need to be told this, but that is a really respectable integrity move.